Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome. Today we are going to spend our time in the kitchen and we're going to be making some delicious baked goods. Winter for me is time for snow, time for cozying up in the kitchen, baking, making some delicious, comforting baked treats. The thing today is that I'm going to make a bunch of things that I'll also be able to stock my freezer with them. So we are going to make a Kokosh cake or a babka, number one. Number two, we're gonna make a biscotti. Let me pull up my list of recipes that I'm making. Number three will be white chocolate mocha latte cookies. It's a mouthful of words for one cookie, but it has like the mocha and nuts and chocolates and delicious things inside, so hopefully we like these. And the last thing we're making is a poppy seed with orange glaze, poppy seed cake. All of these recipes that I'm doing are new recipes that we're going to try and see how we like it. And if we like it, it's going to go into our regular rotation of baked goods. So let's get right into it. And I think we're going to start with our Kokosh cake first because that is the most time consuming. And I'm the most excited to try that. So like I said, we're going to be starting off with our Kokosh cake. So the first thing I did was I boiled some water. And now that it's super hot, I'm measuring out 2 3/4 cups of it straight into the bowl of my mixer. I'm going to let it come down to 100 to 110 degrees before I add my yeast. The 1 to 110 is the perfect temperature to proof the yeast in. I can now add my 3 tablespoons of yeast to the water. I also already pre-measured my 1.5 cups of sugar. I removed 1 tablespoon of that and I added it in here together with the yeast. I am going to turn on the mixer, give it a little mix, and we're going to let this yeast proof. Once the yeast has proofed and it's nice and bubbly, I'm going to start by adding in 3 sticks of margarine and a 3/4 cup of orange juice. Now I am turning on my machine and I'm going to add in the rest of my ingredients one at a time, and in between each ingredient I'm going to add some flour to help everything incorporate nicely. So I'm going to add 5 pounds of flour, 1 cup of oil, the remaining 1.5 cups of sugar, 2 tablespoons of vanilla sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 4 eggs, plus 4 egg yolks. And I'm going to let this mix until it's a nice soft dough. Once the dough looks and feels right, I am going to get it out of the machine and into a bowl to rise. So I'm spraying my bowl with some oil, and I find the easiest way to get any dough out of my mixing bowl is to lift the whole bowl, flip it over, let the dough fall out, and usually the dough hook will come along with it. So once all of it falls out, I will then get out the dough hook, and I like to then get the dough nice and smooth so that it can rise a little bit more evenly. This is absolutely not a must, but it just helps it out a little bit. And then I cover it with a plastic to help it sweat and rise a little bit faster, and a towel on top of that as well. While the dough is rising, we're gonna work on our filling. The uniqueness to this babka / Kokosh cake is that we have a dry mixture and a wet mixture. So to start, we're gonna make our dry mixture, which is 2 cups of cocoa, 2 cups of confectionery sugar, 4 cups of regular sugar, 1 package of instant chocolate pudding, and 4 tablespoons of vanilla sugar. And then we're going to mix this all together until you don't see any more clumps of either just sugar or cocoa anywhere. You want it all to be nicely combined. Now I can work on the wet filling. For this, we're going to remove 2 cups of the dry mixture, put it into another bowl, along with a 1/4 cup of oil and 5 to 6 tablespoons of boiling water. Now for the first recipe, I did end up using 6 tablespoons, but then I made the filling 2 more times for the amount of dough that I had, and for those other 2 batches, I only needed the 5 tablespoons of water. Maybe because my water was a drop hotter, I don't know. And when I make this again, I would probably triple the wet filling recipe right away so that I don't have to stop in the middle of shaping to make more of this mixture. I just had no idea how much of it I'll need, so I made it as I went. So once the dough has risen, which will be somewhere between 35 minutes and an hour, maybe a bit longer depending on the temperature in your kitchen. I think for me it was pretty close to the 35-minute mark. My kitchen was kind of warm that day. And what I'm going to do is I measured out 450 grams of the dough and I'm rolling it out. Now, this recipe is from my mother. She took multiple recipes, she combined it, and I took this from her. So I am playing around with it a little bit too, because the size pan that she can purchase is not a size pan that I can get. So she had told me that the size that she gets, she does 450 grams of dough. I would probably do somewhere between 4 and 425 and see where that gets me. And I would also probably try to roll it out a little bit thinner next time, because I didn't get as many rolls when I cut into it. Like it wasn't so much, it was thicker dough with more chocolate per bite instead of a lot thinner dough. You would probably get the same amount of chocolate. It's just more, I would try to get it more like this picture. So once I have the dough rolled out in a nice big rectangle, I am going to spread out first some of the wet filling. And I'm using about 1/3 of the mixture that I made for each, 1/3 of the wet mixture per babka. Once I have the wet mixture on the dough, I'm going to take a little bit of the dry filling and I'm going to sprinkle that on top of the wet mixture, and I'm going to dust off any excess. You only want the pieces that are stuck to the wet filling to be in there. Otherwise, they're just going to fall out as you're rolling it up. Once I have that dry filling on there, I'm going to roll it and oh, which direction is this? I always get confused when recipes say which way to roll it. I'm going to roll the width of it to make it, I'm going to keep the width as it is, roll it. Roll it up. And once I have it all rolled up in a log, I'm going to make it in half and then twist it onto itself to create the babka shape. Once I have the babka fully shaped, I am going to transfer it onto a piece of parchment paper, get it into a pan, a loaf pan, and I'm going to place it in the oven. 2 reasons. Number 1, to make space, because there's a lot going on between the 2 fillings, the surface that I need to prepare to roll up the babkas, and I still have the bowl of the dough and everything. So I get them into the oven, and also this is going to be baked starting off in a cold oven, so I might as well just get it in there as I am getting them ready. Once all of them are done and they're all in the oven, that's when I'm going to turn on the oven, and it's going to go on 340, between 340 and 345. I had it on 345, and it's going to bake for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. Now, there's also a recipe for a streusel, crumb streusel topping to go on top. I just ran out of margarine. I forgot about it when I went to the store and I used up all my margarine for the actual dough. So I didn't make that, but I do have a picture for you what it should look like if you were to do that. And that streusel would be going on top of the babka after getting it into the loaf pan before getting it into the oven. So it would bake at the same time as the babka is in the oven. When the babkas are done baking, I'm getting them out of the oven onto a wire cooling rack. I let them cool in the pans for 10 to 15 minutes. Then I took them out and I let them finish cooling outside, just directly on the cooling rack, still with a paper. And when they were completely cooled and they were ready to be put away, I put them back in the pans into a freezer bag and got it into the freezer. I did think that I would have like half of them pre-sliced, flash freeze them, and then get them into a bag. But it did not work out. I think it might have still been a little bit warm when I tried cutting up the first one, and I got very thick slices, and it just pushed down onto itself, and it didn't hold its structure. So if I were to try to do that again, I would probably um, freeze them a little bit, have them semi-frozen, and then cut into it, let it finish freezing, and then get it into a bag so that I can have ready slices in the freezer, easy to grab. So here you can see what I mean, that it pushed down on itself and the dough is pretty thick. But I am tasting a slice, one of the slices that I tried cutting up, and you can see it's pretty thick. That chocolate, it was so good. Flavor wise, I hit it right on. It is delicious. Um, but I have a ways to go to make it look like the pictures that I shared with you, which is my mother's, which she does an amazing job with it. And I hope that I can get my babkas to look like hers. The next thing we are working on is our Nougat Biscotti. To make this, we're going to start with 3 eggs, cracking it and adding it to the bowl of a mixer. Now this is from a recipe book. You can actually see the picture back there, so I'm not going to be able to give you the exact amounts because I cannot credit them because I don't have a link to share with you guys. Once I have the eggs in the bowl, I turn on the machine and I let it cream and become nice and thick. And then I'm going to slowly add in some sugar and brown sugar and continue mixing it. Mix it well. Then I'm going to add in oil, water, lemon juice, and vanilla. I had just a little bit left, so I did all of the vanilla that I had left. And we're going to mix this until it's fully combined. Once we have the wet mixture done, we can start adding in the flour and the baking powder. And at this point, I should have changed to a paddle attachment, and you'll see why in a minute, because as soon as I started putting in the nuts and the nugget chips, the machine was working too hard and it didn't incorporate it very well. Like now that I've baked it, the nuts and chocolate chips, the nugget chips are not evenly distributed. Had I switched over to a dough hook or a paddle attachment, I feel like it would have been more evenly distributed. And as soon as I'm done adding everything in, I turn the machine off because I don't want to overmix it. Now that I have the batter combined, I am getting out a parchment paper lined cookie sheet, and I'm going to work with wet hands, and I have my sink running so that I can constantly re-wet it. And I took out a third of the dough or batter, and we're going to make 3 biscottis out of it, or 3, what do they call, loaves. And with the wet hands, I am shaping them into the size that I want it to be. And I am to the length, to the width, and the height that I want it, and I shape it like that. And once I'm done with the first one, I take another third of the dough and I form another loaf. And I couldn't fit 3 onto one sheet, so I had to pull out another baking sheet, line that with parchment paper, and make my third one on the second baking sheet. Once I have all 3 loaves shaped, I am combining some sugar with cinnamon in a small bowl. I'm going to sprinkle that over top of the biscotti loaves, and I am doing just a little bit on each loaf so that I evenly divide it between all of them. This is, I feel like, a little bit extreme, but sometimes I like to be exact. But it doesn't really matter. Just sprinkle it over all of them, and then it can go into a preheated oven and bake for 35 to 40 minutes. Now, when this comes out, there's 2 options that you can do. So, option number 1 is that you let it cool for a little bit, you slice it, and then you flip it on the cut side down, put it back in the oven to bake for a little bit longer, or you can skip the flipping it on the side and baking it the second time around, depending on how, if you want the biscotti drier or chewier. So I chose to go with the second round of not doing the second bake. And for me, this is the perfect chewiness. It's not too dry. It has still a little bit of moisture in the center of it. And it doesn't have to be dunked into like a coffee or a tea or something to be able to enjoy it. You can enjoy it just as is. And this is something that my family loves. Not everybody loves the amount of nuts that it has inside, so maybe next time I will do less. But the flavor of it, the texture of it is amazing, and we all enjoy it. And biscotti is, I know from the past that it's something that we always enjoy. I just like to play around with it, find different recipes, different techniques of doing it, and different flavor profiles, and see how we enjoy different variations of the same type of dish. On to the next thing, we are working on our Poppyseed cake. For this, I do have a recipe, so I will link it for you down below. And we are starting with our flour and adding that to our mixer. Next, I am adding in my sugar, salt, and baking powder. I'm putting the splash guard on, and we're going to let this combine for 1 minute. Now, the recipe does say to create a well and add in our next few ingredients. I did that, and as you'll see, there was really no point in doing it because the well didn't do anything. There was way more liquid. So I am adding in my oil. Next, it says to put in either soy milk or water. I decided to go with the soy milk. Next, we're going to add eggs, and we're going to do 1 at a time. And now I'm adding a generous splash of vanilla extract. And last to go in is the poppy seeds. Now I'm going to turn on the mixer on low, and we're going to slowly increase the speed until the batter is nice and smooth. Now the batter is ready to be transferred to a greased bun pan, and this made a lot of batter. If you make this at home, I would suggest not adding the entire thing into the pan. Like, I would stop at this point. You don't need all of it because it made such a tall cake, and it took a very long time to bake it through fully, way longer than the recipe called for, which is an hour to an hour 15, and I needed to bake it longer than that. And even with that, baking it longer, it was like when you cut into it, there's still like a little bit of moisture at the top over here, but once you flip it over, it becomes the bottom. Once the cake is in the oven, we're going to work on our glaze. So it calls for confection sugar and orange juice. And you want to make this while the cake is still in the oven, because when it comes out, you need to poke holes in the cake and drizzle this glaze on top so that it can soak into the cake, to add that orange flavor into the cake itself. What did I want to say? Yeah, I didn't record that because it was on a Friday. My day was busy and I forgot to record when I was doing that part. But once you put the glaze over, you let it cool a little bit longer in the cake pan, and then you can run a spatula around the outside to make sure that it's not gonna stick, and then invert it onto a cooling rack and finish cooling it completely. Now the picture of this recipe does have a glaze on it, so I made another batch of this same glaze, and first of all, it doesn't look anything like the picture. Um, Second, they probably made a different glaze. They didn't put the recipe in, and this glaze was way too loose. Even with adding more confection sugar, it was still too loose, and it just ran off the cake. So if you were to make this, just put a different glaze. And my thoughts on this cake, and my family's as well, is that it's a pretty basic cake. I've made so many better fun cakes, and if I want to make a poppy seed again, I would want the orange in the cake. I would want the lemon, because I've seen a lot of lemon poppy seed. I would want it in the cake, not just the glaze that you add in afterwards, because the flavor of the orange didn't really come through. It wasn't strong enough for me. If I'm making an orange cake, I want to feel that orange. I want to feel that citrus in it. So I don't think I would make this specific recipe again. I would, like I said, if I want a poppy seed citrus cake, I would look up a different recipe and try something else. And over here, you can see that I'm struggling to break up that confection sugar to dissolve it and combine it with a orange juice. And it took a while. And when I made the glaze that I put on the outside, I actually pre-sifted the confectionery sugar, but the same thing still happened when I was mixing it together. Oh, and apparently I did record when I took out the cake and I poked it with I used my candy thermometer and poured the glaze that we prepared over top to let it soak into the cake. And now on to our last thing, which is our white chocolate mocha latte cookies. Like I said earlier, it's a mouthful to say, but worth it to make. So, like with our biscotti, this is from a book, as you can see in the video here behind the mixing bowl. And I do not have a link to share with you, so I'm not going to tell you the exact amount. I'm just going to tell you what I added and the methods and how I did it. So we are starting off with some butter that I had softened by leaving it on the counter, and we're going to add some sugar and light brown sugar, and we're going to cream this together until it is light and fluffy. Once we are there, I can start adding in the eggs one at a time and vanilla extract. And I want everything to fully combine, so I'm going to scrape down the sides to make sure that everything gets incorporated, and you want this to be well blended before moving on to the next ingredients, which will be starting with flour, then some cocoa to make it mocha, and espresso powder to bring out more of that mocha flavor, baking soda, and last is some salt. Now I'm going to use my spoon and I'm going to mix the flour, cocoa, espresso powder together instead of doing it in a bowl. It seems like I forgot to do it over here. Let's see. Yes, I forgot to do it. And then we're going to combine this. Now I can start adding in the additions, which is some white chocolate, some nuts, and I did forget to put in chocolate chips on camera, but I did add it before I shaped them. After I added the chocolate chips, they are ready to be scooped and baked. And as I'm looking over the recipe right now, I see that I was supposed to flatten it. It does say to flatten slightly. I didn't do that, which it still baked okay. It still has a little bit of a dome on the cake. It's not on the cookie. It's not as flat as the pictures have shown, which I'm okay with. And this will bake for about 10 to 12 minutes. And the tricky thing with a dark cookie like this is that you can't see the browning. So you have to go by what it looks like, or if you're comfortable, like tap the top of some of the cookies to see how soft it is, if it's mostly set or not, because I mean it's still going to continue baking when you take it out of the oven, so you don't want it to be completely set because then it'll be very dry cookies. But yeah, just go by what it looks like and let it cool on a wire rack. And this is a cookie that everyone in my family enjoys. It is good. It's dairy, so we can't always eat it. We can't eat it when after a meat meal, but it is so worth this. It is so worth it. So something that I like to do when I'm making cookies, especially if it's not a very big batch, and I'm going to be baking everything on the same day, is that I will fill up 2 cookie sheets, get that into the oven, and then I'll pre-scoop the rest of the cookies. So as the trays come out of the oven, I have them ready. I can just transfer the cookies onto the cookie sheet and get them straight back into the oven. I don't have to scoop it again later. That's all for today. Just a few quiet winter days spent baking for no reason other than the joy of it. Thank you for being here and sharing this slow moment with me. I'll see you again soon.